Frank Gaffney is synonymous with national security. In fact, he's the go-to person to rally a coalition of experts ready to tackle any threat. He's the guy I went to when uncovering economic warfare and financial terrorism. He walked me into offices in the U.S. Senate and House, and he is on a first-name basis with conservative leadership. Frank also opened doors in the intelligence community and the Pentagon, and he's known by all the major media. I'd say they were all friends, but Frank has a passion for truth over politics, so he has plenty of enemies as well. In the nearly 2 decades I've worked with him, I've watched him disregard his personal welfare multiple times for the good of the country. Frank got his start as a key staffer in Congress and later as an Assistant Secretary of Defense for President Reagan. He now hosts Securing America with Frank Gaffney on Real America's Voice. He's with the Institute for the American Future. He literally leads the special forces in the war of ideas. Welcome, Frank, back to the Economic War Room.
I'm ecstatic to be in it, at least virtually. Thank you, Kevin.
You know, let's start with this whole special forces in the war of ideas. Can you explain what that means?
Well, I think you captured the essence of it, Kevin. It's that when you have problems that are surpassingly hard, especially, you need people, well, like you, with particular expertise and backgrounds that lend themselves to problem solving. And what I've found over the years, both when I was in the Pentagon and realized that I needed this kind of help, and subsequently when I set about trying to provide it to good people in government, if we went to patriotic, public-spirited, and highly proficient individuals, and you are, again, a prime example of the breed, they would volunteer their time and energy to help work whatever the problem was. So at the moment, under the rubric of our new Institute for the American Future, there are 5 different coalitions that we're sponsoring to work on 5 very, very pressing national and national security, especially problems. One concerning the Chinese Communist Party. We call it the Committee on the Present Danger China, of which you are a founding member. Another involving the globalists and their effort to impose a world government on us instead of our constitutional representative republic. We call that the Sovereignty Coalition. A third is the one that has been very much, I think, at the forefront, including with a very important program just yesterday, the Victory Coalition, whose purpose is to counter this threat we face very dramatically, obviously at the moment, from Iran, of Sharia supremacism. The fourth is an effort to just try to help make America's military great again. We call it Save America's Military. It started out with a focus on the cultural Marxism of the Biden administration being wielded against our men and women in uniform. We're working on a variety of other ways to help them do their jobs, including by having reliance on American medicines for battlefield kits, among other things, not Chinese ones. And finally, the manifestation that I think is really of the biggest of all of the threats, namely the spiritual warfare that we are confronting. That manifestation is, I think, what's going on with persecution of Christians. And so our Save the Persecuted Christians Coalition is aimed at trying to prevent that horror to now 365 million Christians around the world by holding the persecutors accountable and punishing them for what they do. So those are examples of our teams, and I'm very proud of them, and especially proud of my association with great people like yourself in them.
Well, you're doing terrific work. And everything that you talked about is in the headlines today. And I want to talk about some of those things, like number 1, Iran and Trump and Israel. Number 2, Iranian sleeper cells in the United States. Number 3, the Chinese biowarfare attack on our food supply. And number 4, the threat of epic cities. Finally, we'll wrap up at the end of the show with how to prepare for homeland threats. But let's start with your perspective on Iran. How close were they to nuclear weapons, and how close are they now?
I don't think we know, Kevin. I'm persuaded that it's perfectly possible they have them already. They've been beavering away for decades building the infrastructure to manufacture them themselves. You might recall, and I know you do, but your audience as well, it took us 3 years during the Manhattan Project to go from inventing the science of atomic weapons to dropping 2 of them on Japan. It's inconceivable to me that people who have access to much more advanced technologies, and a lot of people like the North Koreans and the Chinese and the Russians, Pakistan perhaps, willing to help them and maybe even sell them a weapon or two, haven't gotten their hands on it already. But in terms of their own program, Kevin, you get all kinds of estimates. My guess is they have been very close. Even the International Atomic Energy Agency of the United Nations, for heaven's sakes, had said they had enough highly enriched uranium on hand to produce perhaps as many as 15 weapons. That's, I think perhaps right, perhaps unduly optimistic, actually.
Well, do you think it was the right call for President Trump to get involved and drop those bunker buster bombs?
I do. I think it was a necessary step. I think much more important, frankly, has been what the Israelis have been doing to take down not just the nuclear infrastructure and the weapons by which they might be delivered, ballistic missiles particularly, but also elements of the Iranian mullahs' military intelligence security apparatus, and even some of their own leaders. I wish to God that they'd been allowed to finish the job. I think it's frankly a mistake that that's been interrupted, and that regime and its desire for nuclear weapons, yes, but its willingness to use other means of attacking our forces in the region, Israel, of course, possibly the Strait of Hormuz, and us even here at home, which I think we'll get to in a moment, is a potential invitation to disaster, and unnecessarily so.
All right, we just have a little bit of time before the break. Quick answer. Was it unconstitutional for the president to do what he did? Have other presidents done similar things? And what are your thoughts on that? And then we'll take a break.
Having served in the Congress, I'm rather keen on the constitutional process for going to war. I think that other presidents have used weapons, perhaps not as precisely as this, but I think it would be desirable if the war were to continue for a congressional authorization to be given.
All right. Thank you, Frank. We're talking about Iran. We're talking about headlines. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the threat to our homeland that could result from Iranian sleeper cells. We'll be right back. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com.
Gold holds its value far better than the US dollar. Let's see what happens when I go in the sweet shop and pay with gold. Can I pay with gold?
I mean, I'll take a wait, find out how much it costs.
Do you know what? Basically, do you know why I'm even using gold?
I do not.
It holds its value over time, but it's a bit difficult to spend, isn't it? Do you take this?
Yes.
That's MasterCard. Yeah, but I'm actually going to pay with gold, believe it or not, using this. That's my MasterCard, and it's linked to my gold wallet. So let's just watch that. Authorizing. Yeah, add a tip.
Thank you.
So this is your store?
Yes, sir.
And how much gold did I pay?
0.2243 grams.
Yeah, success. Bought with gold, paid with glitz.
We're talking with the great Frank Gaffney. We're talking about the action just taken by President Trump in Iran, coordinated with the Israelis, and then he put a ceasefire in and everything else. Does that put us at risk here in the United States? I suppose if they have ICBMs and nuclear weapons, we're at risk from that, but there's a much greater risk that really results from Biden policies and an open border. Frank, can you explain that?
Well, I suspect most of your audience is familiar with what Joe Biden did, essentially to, well, some say open our border, I'd say destroy, particularly our southern border. The northern one has been porous for a long time and was even more so on his watch. We know for sure, Kevin, that 10 million plus individuals took advantage of the opportunity to come here across that open border during the Biden years. Some of them were gotaways. We don't know who those were. We don't know why they're here. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they're up to. But what we have been on notice about for years is that there are in this country cells of terrorist organizations that have been enabled and funded and presumably under the influence of the Iranian mullahs. Hamas, Hezbollah, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, and the like. Those are a ticking time bomb in our country, I believe. And I must say, as a guy who's spent essentially my entire professional life, which is approaching 50 years now, I can't quite get my head around the idea that this isn't a problem. We're talking about leaving the mullahs in place when, as I mentioned in the previous block, they pose a threat to all kinds of interests we have in the Middle East. But for them to be here, and in top of those cells, Kevin, as you know, we are aware of maybe as two, maybe more, assassination teams that have been inserted into our country, apparently with the mission, among other things, of killing our president. Now, how could it possibly be acceptable that we would allow a regime that is doing all of that, or has at least the capacity to do all that to us, to remain essentially in place and presumably with a lot more grievances than they had before? Again, I can't overstate enough. I believe this is inviting disaster in our country.
Well, it's not just, this isn't a conservative talking point. This isn't just Frank Gaffney. Here's a New York Times article, June 23rd. FBI warns of possible retaliation by Iran after bombing of nuclear sites. FBI and DHS officials cautioned state and local law enforcement of the possibility of threats to U.S. communities. They flat out admit it. They admit that there are Iranians who have come across the border when it was open, some gotaways and others. They admit that there are sleeper cells here in the United States, and yet this isn't top of news. That's shocking to me.
Well, again, it'd be one thing if it were just in the news. I'm talking about policymaking. I'm talking, Kevin, about a decision at a moment when I believe the Israelis were poised to finish the job. And by that, I don't mean imposing a new regime on the Iranian people. I mean enabling the Iranian people to remove the existing regime and decide on their own who they wanted to be governed by in the future. I can't think of a more strategic error than interfering with that action. And then, as I say, I think making it possible for this regime in Iran, yes, to continue beavering away in connection with its nuclear ambitions, but also to take at any moment these other kinds of actions against us, our allies, and our interests.
Well, we're going to pray for a free Iran movement, because that's the ultimate answer, is the Iranian people rising up and saying, we want freedom. And that's something that they should have. We're not talking regime change top down. We're talking about free Iran bottom up. All right, let's turn to another domestic threat. But this is not necessarily from an open border, but it is from lax policies towards China. The story says Chinese nationals charged with conspiracy and smuggling a dangerous biological pathogen into the United States for their work at a University of Michigan laboratory. Now, this is frightening because it's Chinese spies bringing stuff in, and we're not talking COVID here. We're talking a fungus that could kill our food supply. Can you comment on that?
I'd be delighted to. It's a reminder that food security is national security. What these folks were doing, and you called them spies, technically they were students, were doing at the University of Michigan in one of their laboratories was experimenting with a pathogen that would be devastating if released into our food supply, because it affects all kinds of foodstuffs, agricultural products, corn, rice, wheat, and the like. But it also can have knock-on effects, I gather, for people who consume such food. It's, in other words, a terrible threat to something we take for granted all too often in our country, and we depend upon critically. The fact, though, is that these are two, maybe three. There's a separate instance where a gal came in with something called roundworm. I'm still not entirely clear what that is, but it's not a good thing for our agriculture or our people either. These are three people out of something on the order of 277,000 students from China that are in our country at the moment. And I regret to say again that not so long ago, the Trump administration was going to send them packing. But as part of a deal, as I understand it, for continued supply or access at least to Chinese exports of rare earth minerals and magnets, the president said, yeah, you can have as many Chinese students here as you want. I think that's a very serious mistake, and I'm concerned that students like the ones that have been apprehended here are probably not the only ones that have been tasked by the Chinese Communist Party to do us harm, maybe in a lot of other ways, but doesn't much matter as long as they're working for the Chinese Communists, which they must do under Chinese law, as you know, Kevin. It could be incalculably harmful, again, to our country right here at home.
Yeah, and the threat is the Chinese Communist Party. That's the threat. The people are wonderful. There's no problem. Same with the Iranian people. They can be terrific and wonderful. But they found these students with wadded up napkins when they were going through TSA. They found this fungus in it. All right, this is a serious threat. It's a threat to your livelihood. It's a threat to your family. We'll be right back with more and Frank Gaffney after the break.
Somewhere a perversion has taken place. Our natural unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government, and freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It has to be fought for and defended by each generation.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
In this most critical time in our nation's history, now more than ever, Americans need to align with companies that support our constitutional rights and God-given freedoms. Patriot Mobile supports your values and provides exceptional 100% US-based customer service. Join the movement today. Go to patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
I'm outside Babe's, which I'm told is the quintessential chicken restaurant here in Roanoke, Texas. Let's go and see if we can buy the food in here, chicken with gold.
It's gonna be the fried chicken.
This is unbelievable. How am I going to fill this in? I seriously actually don't know how to begin with this. This is so overwhelming. Do you think I can pay with gold?
I don't know. You may have to ask the cashier. I don't handle it.
Can I pay with gold? But actually, you said I could pay with this? Okay, I'm gonna pay with this, but I'm gonna pay with gold. So look at the price of gold going up. That's pretty cool, yeah? Right, this is Babes, yeah? How much gold did I pay? Gold, how many grams?
0.26.
0.26, quarter of a gram of gold. How about that?
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool, yeah. Success! Bought with gold, paid with glint.
We're talking with Frank Gaffney about some threats to our homeland from really national security threats, whether it's Iran or China or the Muslim Brotherhood we're going to get to. There's this big push to put these epic cities in Texas, of all places, that would be Muslim-oriented communities. And, you know, we're not against the Muslim people. We are against Sharia supremacy and the idea that we should subvert our Constitution and cause all Americans to bow to Sharia law as a part of this radical Islamic jihadism. Frank, can you describe what an epic city is and why it's a potential threat?
Well, I guess it could be used generically. I think it specifically refers to Epic City, which stands for East Plano Islamic Center City, as you know, north of Dallas. It's a community, I believe it's something on the order of 400 acres, in which they're going to put 1,000 or so homes, all of which would be Muslim occupied, all of which would be subject, apparently, to Sharia, gathered around a mosque that is very much a Sharia supremacist operation. There's a fellow there by the name of Yasser Qadi, originally, I think, from Pakistan. Our friend Amy Meck has done a wonderful job exposing, going back to our first topic, Kevin, this guy, Qadi, who's the top jurist in the fiqh council of the Muslim Brotherhood in North America, which is kind of the enforcement arm on Sharia doctrine and its obligations. This guy was caught on tape in his mosque inveighing that even though his congregants are Sunni Muslims, they should stand with Iran against the United States and fight for Iran, as a matter of fact. It's evidence of, I think, the jihadism that Sharia commands its adherents to follow. All Muslims don't practice it, thank God, but enough of them do, and most especially the authorities of the faith do. And Kevin, it's not just confined to that Dallas area. It's happening in Houston. It's happening, I think, across Texas. A major effort seems to be underway now to really put mosques in and build these communities out and have effectively no-go zones, and the sorts of things that we've been watching play out in Europe to very, very devastating effects for, well, the countries involved, yes, but also, I would argue, Judeo-Christian civilization more generally. And that's what's in the crosshairs of these 12ers, as they call them, running Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood and others elsewhere in this country. And interestingly enough, if you can believe it, liberal Democrats in New York City have just elected or chosen to be their representative in the upcoming fall general election for the mayor of New York City, a guy who is not only a Shiite Muslim, but boasts of being a 12er himself. What does that mean? It means that these are people who believe that they will be able to bring back their Messiah figure, the Mahdi, who's been in a well. He's the 12th Imam living in a well since the 8th century. They're going to bring him back on the basis of an outpouring of suffering and lamentations, and he will usher in the golden age of Islam. And unfortunately, what it seems to take to trigger his return is something that's a lot like the apocalypse. So having nuclear weapons in the hands of people who believe that, having, sleeper cells in our country armed by people who believe that, having the mayor of New York City be somebody who believes that is an obvious problem.
Well, he's also a socialist, right? I mean, this is the red-green axis playing. He's a communist. So he uses the term socialist, but he's being embraced by young people and other things. Here's good news in Texas. Senator John Cornyn calls on the DOJ to investigate Epic City, and Governor Abbott signs a law that takes aim at North Texas' Epic City in Dallas News. So at least there are people in government beginning to take notice, but it's a little late. And hopefully it's not a day late and a dollar short. It's a little bit late. This is an ongoing clear threat from the red-green axis that could be resulting in Iranian sleeper cells acting out. It could result in communists acting out, killing our food supply. It's this whole red-green threat. So our good friend, Colonel John Mills, has published a Substack titled Some Thoughts on Home Preparedness. Tell us a little bit about John Mills, and then I'll run through some of his recommendations.
Yeah, John is one of our most accomplished national security practitioners. He's a founding member of our Committee on the Present Danger of China, again, as you are. He is an incredibly experienced guy, both as a special operator in the United States Army, whose ranks he rose through to that of colonel. He has also been a civilian serving in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Department of Energy, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Council. He's deeply experienced with the deep state. He's written a book titled War Against the Deep State. And he's also been, a thought leader on national security with us and others.
Yeah, no, he's a tremendous guy. His Substack was great. It starts off, we need a modicum of preparation. This is not crazy prepper stuff. This is having gone through COVID, having gone through the street riots in LA, but also the Black Lives Matter riots and everything else. He gives us 2 rules in the first 90 days of chaos if the U.S. homeland is attacked. He says, 1, you don't want to be part of the crazed mob at Costco, and 2, you don't want to be on the freeway going somewhere, but you're not sure where. And those are basic thoughts. He lists some things that you need to have on hand. We're going to put all these, by the way, in our economic battle plan, because I can't run through and read all of them and you get all of them. But I also would like to point you to a battle plan that we did back, it's episode 106, and we're 250 episodes past that, titled Insurrection and Violence. It's a complete guide to preparing your family. Very practical things you can do about the threat that we're facing. Frank, just 30 seconds. Is this threat real, and should people prepare?
Let me just say at the outset, I praise God for you having 300 and some shows under your belt. This is such an important service to our country, Kevin. These threats are all real, folks. We're trying not to exaggerate them or scare you. This isn't fear porn. These are simple admonitions that the kinds of recommendations that I think our friend Rich Higgins put into that battle plan, or John Mills has put into his most recent Substack post, are vitally needed steps for your own security and that of the people you love.
Frank, where can people follow your work? You got 10 seconds.
Institute for the American Future is at usfuture.org. We also have securingamerica.substack.com, and I am at Frank Gaffney on Twitter.
All right. We're going to summarize all this in our free economic battle plan. You can get a copy at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle place. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.